So now, to introduce our main program is Taylor Schmitzu. A few fun facts about Taylor. She's a former ballet dancer of 15 years. She keeps active by hiking, and in fact, she went on 26 hikes and covered 175 miles last year and is looking to do about the same this year. A graduate of the UW Business Mentors Program, she's been in media sales for the last 8 years and currently an account exec for Intersection, doing all the advertising for the buses and light rail. So please help me welcome to the podium, Taylor.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. So our keynote speaker is one for the books. Matthew Trunnell, in his role at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, he oversees enterprise and scientific computing services and leads the Fred Hutch Data Commonwealth, a team of data analysts and software engineers building new capabilities to leverage clinical data for research. Trunnell is also working to forge connections between Fred Hutch and the broader technology community in the Pacific Northwest to help power cancer research. Trunnell came to Fred Hutch from the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, where he had served as head CIO and manager of research computing during the period of explosive growth in research data infrastructure capabilities in support of the growth in next-generation sequencing activities. As IT and informatics became more central to the large-scale generation of data, Trunnell initiated a new organization within the Institute, bringing together computational biologists and professional software engineers focused on developing advanced informatic capabilities. See, we're getting already applause. Having started his professional life as a computational oceanographer, Trunnell found his way into the genomics world in the late 90s and has been supporting applied scientific computing in both academic and commercial environments since. So some fun facts about Matthew, because I had to ask him about this before. One, his daughter, Sydney, is a competitive rock climber, and since moving to Washington, and she's only in middle school, so I guess I should go talk with her. And his nickname is Matter to his long life colleagues over here. So let's give Matthew a warm Seattle for welcome.
All right, am I here? Can people hear me? Just want to make sure. No? Yes? Oh, that may be a little too much. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Thanks to Rob and the program committee. Thank you to the president and to all of you. This is a great honor to be here. I know that you had the opportunity to hear the director of the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center speak in October, Dr. Gary Gilliland. He, I'm sure, shared a lot about what we're doing, about the history of the Hutch, about why we're such an important part of this community. We are the NCI, National Cancer Institute, designated comprehensive cancer center for Seattle. We are Seattle's cancer center, but not just Seattle. We are the only cancer center so designated within Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Alaska. We have a lot of the area of the country that we serve. It's an extraordinary place, and it's a place that drew me here 3.5 years ago, as Taylor mentioned, from work that I was doing on the East Coast, with the opportunity of doing something really transformational. Fred Hutch has always been about finding cures. And this is not what the conversation has been in cancer in most places. We talk about cancer historically as we hope to be able to treat it, like a chronic disease, like HIV. Talking about curing cancer is something that's been a little looked down upon. But starting 40 years ago with Donald Thomas, who was a pretty brave and innovative clinician, Dr. Thomas pioneered the use of bone marrow transplant as a treatment for blood cancers. And now, cancers that had been largely fatal can be cured through this approach and through things that have been developed since then. This led to stem cell transplant. More than 1 million patients around the world have been treated based on what was developed here at Fred Hutch. Dr. Thomas is one of 3 Nobel laureates at Fred Hutch. It's really a tremendous place scientifically. Let's see. We are the home of the Women's Health Initiative. This is a population health study that started more than 20 years ago, following more than 160,000 women across the country, and has identified a number of major advances in treatment for various diseases. We are the Center for the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. This is not something that people often associate with Fred Hutch, but we're actually quite a leader in HIV research. We led the development of the core scientific work that led to the development of the HPV virus. So one of the other things that we often tend to overlook is that about 1/5 of cancers globally actually have an infectious trigger. And so our work in infectious disease is really tied to our cancer work. And then finally, let's see. I'm not sure where I'm pointing this, so I'm not doing, aha, okay, thank you. And then finally, our current work in immunotherapy, which is really the leading edge right now of cancer research. This is where we are beginning to see curative therapies for a range of cancers. Not yet all cancers, not yet all patients, but it's a tremendously exciting time right now in cancer research. Let me ask, raise your hand if a loved one or you yourself have been affected by cancer. Statistics say that 1 in 3 will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. That's a tremendous number. This is a very compelling place to work and Seattle is the right place to do this. And the reason, and of course I have my biases, but the reason is not just the amazing science that we've seen demonstrated at the Fred Hutch over the last 43 years, but it's the fact that cancer research, biomedical research in general, is becoming much more data intensive. There's opportunities now for technologists, computationalists like me, to come and work alongside biologists and clinicians to advance cancer research. That intersection is nowhere other than Seattle is that intersection so dramatic. The opportunity is huge. This is the place where we are going to drive dramatic advances in cancer. When the director spoke in October, he may have articulated a statement that he had first made in 2015, saying that he believes we will have curative approaches to most, if not all, human cancers within 10 years. That 10 years is now 81 months and 11 days. This is a clock that drives the work that we do. We actually literally have countdown clocks in places in the organization. This is an imperative, the work that we are doing. Because this statistic of 1 in 3, the prevalence of cancer means that just in the time that I'm talking to you here, 100 people across the US will receive the news that they have cancer. 1,000 people across the world, just in the time that I'm talking. So, how are we going to do this? The way we're going to do this is by bringing everything we can to bear on the problem. And this means leveraging the great technology, data science, machine learning that has been a strength of Seattle, together with the amazing biology, particularly in these areas of immunotherapy and infectious disease that really drive the work of Fred Hutch. So I want to tell you just 3 quick stories of how we're working together, just to give you an idea of what we're doing. But this is where we're going to be, we'll see more and more of this kind of work going forward. So to begin with, I want to talk about an area which in the business is called deep learning, and in particular about this area called natural language processing. Natural language processing is basically the idea of trying to get a computer to read text and understand certain things about text, or to hear and parse and understand certain things. So if you've talked to Siri or Alexa or Google Home, there's a deep learning engine behind that. This turns out to be tremendously relevant to us in the cancer space because when we're doing work to bring therapies into the clinic, that process requires clinical trials. This is the foundation of how we advance work. Part of building a clinical trial is identifying the right set of people who should be part of that, and that involves reading electronic medical records. Now, there's been a lot of advances over the last 10 years in digitizing, in establishing these electronic medical records, but the vast majority of the information that we need looks like this. It lives in a narrative form, in clinical notes. This is something that is very difficult to compute against. But the information that we need in order to, for instance, drive clinical trials is scattered throughout here. Basic information about the patient, information about their disease state, information about prescriptions. We have, I don't even know how many, upwards of 40 people probably at Hutch, clinical abstractors who are spending their days doing this. In practice, a very well-trained abstractor can do this level of annotation, pulling out this data. They can do about 1.5 patient records an hour. And that's an average. Patient records can vary a lot. There may be 10 notes, there may be 1,000 notes in a patient record. So this is a place that we partnered with Amazon. Amazon, that had been developing a lot of capabilities for natural language processing, Alexa, for instance, and we worked with them to train a system to understand the specific language that we speak in the medical space. This gave rise to a commercial service. This was released in November of last year. It's called Comprehend Medical. With Comprehend Medical, we can now do almost 10,000 notes in an hour on just a single instance. And of course, one of the things about the cloud is that it scales broadly, which means we're not rate limited by this anymore. Now, there's a lot of other places that we need to work, but here, working directly with our technology partner, we are accelerating a key part of the cancer research and cancer cure development process. I'm going to give you now another side of the story. So this is about treating patients today with cancer, and how can we bring technology to bear to improve cancer treatments and to improve the experience of patients. It turns out that in Washington State, well over 50% of patients who start chemotherapy end up in the emergency room within 6 months. Often, this is for avoidable reasons. A clinician will tell you that this number should be 15% and not 50%. Ending up in the emergency room is not good for anyone, not for the patient, not for the healthcare system, not for the hospital. So why does it happen? Turns out to be a data science question. So we have a team, the Hutchison Institute for Cancer Outcomes Research, that has been amassing information in Washington State to be able to begin to address that information. And in a partnership with Microsoft now, we are developing a wearable device that will monitor certain aspects of a cancer patient's health in a way that we can a way that then we can analyze and perhaps intervene before the patient ends up in the emergency room. So the process looks like this. Patient has a wearable device that's communicating with a mobile phone. I'm just going to try to find mine just to wave it around to show you, but you know what they look like. And that then is generating data that we can use in a computational sense to develop predictive algorithms to see, can we see something coming, an event that might, if not intervened, lead a person into the emergency room. This could be something simple. Maybe someone's not taking anti-nausea medication until the end of the week when they feel too bad and the clinic's closed and they go to the ER. Can we see that coming early enough that we can trigger an intervention by engaging the clinic directly? So right now we're just moving in to an early pilot trial with a dozen or so clinics in Washington State. Early work, but another example of the connection between the cancer research and a pure technology organization to drive advances in cancer care. So really, working together with our technology partners, we're seeking to improve the quality of life of cancer patients. So I want to share one other quick story here, and this is part of why I invited my colleague here. And this is in the area of data visualization. Data visualization turns out to be A, hard, B, tremendously important, and C, probably nowhere better in Seattle than a place to do this. So as we generate more and more data of various types, data visualization becomes an absolutely key tool to interacting with it. And let me just give you one example of how we're working in this space. Earlier this year, or I guess we're in 2019, early last year, the Hutchison Institute for Cancer Outcomes Research, HICOR, which is a group that studies the financial impact of cancer, released a first-in-nation study on the value and outcomes of cancer care delivered within Washington State. So this is for certain disease, certain practices, certain measures of outcomes that were decided together with the patient communities, the physician communities, and the insurance communities over a period of about 5 years. Put this together, tremendous. Super exciting. You can look and see that some hospitals are stronger here, some hospitals are stronger there, some hospitals are more expensive here, some are more expensive there. Nothing surprising, except now it's actionable. And now the clinics can take this data and start to work with it. But we would like to do more with these data. We have trained statisticians who can sit and pore over these data and understand what they mean. We started a partnership with Tableau through the Tableau Foundation to leverage not just their technology, and they have beautiful technology to make pictures, but their expertise in data visualization, so that we can take this large and complex data set, make it available to clinicians, hospital owners who are looking to optimize, to insurers who are looking also to optimize from their side, but ultimately to us, to patients themselves, to be able to interact with this huge corpus of data and understand and explore the value of cancer care and the regional distribution of cancer care in whatever particular disease area they happen to be struggling with. So in this way, we're actually working to ultimately to increase access to cancer care by taking data that we've generated rather meticulously, partnering with a technology organization to help engage the broader community with these data, and thereby advance the field here in Washington. So, Gary's statement about curative therapies to most human cancers in a little over 81 months. Can we cure cancer? It's not going to happen only in Seattle. But the answer to this question is almost certainly yes. Why? Because we're curing cancer today. We are seeing in clinical trials of new therapeutic approaches patients who have exhausted all conventional treatments, who go on an immunotherapy clinic, and this is an area where we are really leading in Seattle. We have the first in nation dedicated immunotherapy clinic, the Bezos Family Clinic that opened 2 years ago at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And we are seeing patients cured. Not all patients and not all diseases. But if we look back to 2015, where Gary first made this statement, which then had to go and defend on CNBC the next day, to where we are now, 3 years later, we're tracking. Long way to go, but we're tracking. So that's what I wanted to share. I'd be delighted to entertain any questions if you have questions. If they're deeply medical questions, I'll have to remind you I'm an oceanographer by training. So I will have to defer those. I understand there are mic runners, yes.
Let's start here with past President Todd.
If information is power, those large stores of data that you have certainly have to be considered a source of power. Concerns about abuse, potential abuses, and your approaches to security?
This is a fascinating area. So first of all, let me just say, wearing my IT hat, that we're very confident in our technical security controls and others. But that's not the interesting part of that question. The interesting part of this question, it's something that we're wrestling with as a community now, is we recognize that data have value. Like, they have intrinsic value. They're not just the byproducts of research or service. In some cases, they may actually have intellectual property. But at the same time, we have a moral imperative to share these data if we can use those to advance research. It's a very hard problem to think about. My role actually officially changed in January. I think this was after the information had been shared here. I am now the Chief Data Officer at Fred Hutch. And it is part of my role to drive the thinking about exactly those questions. How do we share data? Why do we share data? What are we concerned about? How do we protect privacy? How do we ensure regulatory compliance? But how do we advance the field? Because none of us, not Fred Hutch, not MD Anderson, not Memorial Sloan Kettering, are going to do this on their own. We have to work together. So it's a key point, and thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Perhaps this is a related question. I was just wondering about this cooperative effort as you work with other organizations, because Fred Hutch can't be isolated in this effort, and it's only so far as you, well, I would think, can cooperate with others that you get a synergy that could bring this cure home faster.
That's absolutely right. I mean, one of the wonderful things about Hutch by itself is it's a tremendously collaborative place. If you interview the researchers and faculty there, they'll say that's one of the reasons they come to Hutch and stay at Hutch, and many of them stay for quite a long time. My reason for coming was to help build these connections between Hutch and other organizations and other research institutions as well, because this is really how we're going to drive towards 2025. It has to be done in partnership. And this represents, it's actually quite an interesting time, this represents a fundamentally different way of doing science than we've traditionally done it in academia. I mean, often there's collaboration, but not really this kind of team approach that we are seeing more and more now. And I'll mention that one of the things that we've just done at Fred Hutch, this was in November, we established what we call an integrated research center in translational data science. And this is partnered with an integrated research center in immunotherapy that we started 2 years ago. And this is trying to build up that team science muscle in both the clinical space and the computational space to really drive this forward.
Question here. One more question here. Jimmy Collins.
Thank you, Kathy. In my experience, aspirational goals help to incent unexpected team achievements. I also am aware, though, that when we attract franchise players to the team, that they have high expectations. And you, in your last answer, gave a little bit of a clue about how your expectations have been met. I'd be curious about what you learned after having made a bet on the Seattle community with your professional reputation and your energy. How have your expectations been met or exceeded by our environment?
It's a fascinating question. I don't know that I've thought of it in that context. I had done some partnership work in my previous organization, but really this is not what I consider my strength. Again, I'm a technologist. I believed pretty strongly in the landscape here. I had done my graduate work at the University of Washington. The University of Washington Computer Science Department is one of the best in the country for machine learning and data science. So I knew that we had the resources here. It has been a journey, and we've run a number of projects with different organizations, commercial organizations. We've done some work with Pacific Northwest National Labs that people may be familiar with. It hasn't been easy. Perhaps there were times that I was a little naive, but the reason that it's hard is primarily around these issues of data. It's because when we come together around data, it takes a lot of time to sort out all of the questions of how we're going to share. It's not because there's not alignment of interests. Amazon has a strong commitment to impacting healthcare, as you probably know. Microsoft has an active healthcare program, Next Healthcare, that we work closely with. So there's a lot of interest, but getting the non-technical parts right turns out to be really hard. And one of the reasons that Seattle is the place to make this happen is because the way that it gets done is you actually physically bring people together to sit at a table. And I don't know any, it's not any more complicated than that. It's that we can walk next door to a technology company and work out whatever we need to work out to drive things forward. So thank you all very much.